Hello, hello. All right. Welcome back to the game engine development stream. Yeah, so I'm probably just going to have to get up again in a second because my coffee's not quite finished dripping. But when we last left off, we had gotten pretty much the scene view to a working point where we can at least use it to view the scene, which is its main job. And now we have the challenge of making it so you can actually edit the entities that are within the scene. There is one bug I want to squash first. I didn't notice it until this morning when I went to fire this up for the first time. Discovered that if you lose focus while you're in the middle of mouse tabbing, so if I just alt-tabbed away, you'll see that my mouse position is still trapped. You're able to see the cursor because with my program no longer in focus, it no longer calls the shots as to what cursor is displayed. But the program is still repositioning the mouse back to where it was when I first started right-clicking. And that's obviously a bug, so we'll need to fix that real quick. But yeah, once that's done, we're going to take a look at the inspector panel. Right now it's literally just a blank window. But now that we've got the ability to select, to enumerate and select entities that are actually in the scene, let's add the ability to change their position or to view and change their world coordinates inside the inspector. I'll be back in just a minute. My coffee's finishing brewing in the kitchen, and then we'll take a look at these things. I'll leave the camera live. I'll just turn my mic off. There we go. And let me get my audio routed through my headphones. Cool. All right. And everything's unmuted in OBS. Sweet. I do have a guy mowing the lawn outside that periodically passes by, so you might hear that come into the audio a little bit. But yeah, let me turn on some jams, and then we'll start with that window focus bug that we were talking about. And I will again be taking advantage of the Riot Games Creator Save playlist. Very, very nice service. Awesome. All right, so let's take a look at that bug real quick. So the bug basically occurs because in IMGUI, when we go to right-click, it detects that we have entered a right-click and then traps the mouse until it detects that we've released it. If we alt-tab away while we're holding down the right mouse button, IMGUI doesn't detect the mouse release. So when I come back, I'm not even holding a button or anything. It's just still locked on. So what we need to do is we need to trigger an off event when the window loses focus. So let's head to the window code for the editor. So this is the Win32 window code. And whenever we lose focus, that is done via WM activate app is the Windows message that triggers this. And we do actually have an enterprise event fire called editor window focus. All we need to do to trigger the release of the right click drag is to simply subscribe to this event. And then we can handle it. And in response to it, we can turn off the is trapped Boolean. All right, so here we are. This is the code where we were doing the camera controls for the scene. mouse trapping, we have a static bool called isTrapped. And then if you right click on the invisible button that is the content area, we set that to true. And then we set it to false if you release. We need to have an additional condition here. So I'll do that right below the others. So we go to EP events, subscribe, and we basically just need to tell it which type or types we care about. In this case, we care about editor window focus. And then we need to provide a callback. In this case, we could do a lambda. However, if we were to do it that way, yeah, we actually would need to move this subscription into the init call. So up here then. So up top, when we go to initialize this view, we create the texture attachment, or we define the specification for the texture attachment, and then we tell the enterprise runtime to create a frame buffer using it. And that's basically just a colored texture that we use to render the game to, or the scene to. And that texture is just used to render the quad that fills the scene view. So in here, we're going to do the EP events thing. So EP event subscribe, editor window focus, and then we need to tell enterprise to disable the isTrapped boolean. So let's add events event reference e, and this is going to be a captureless lambda that we use for responding to the editor window focus event. Like all lambdas, sorry, like all event handlers, we got to return true when it's handled, or false when it's not. This is going to be a case where we say return false because I'm probably never going to return true on an editor event because I'll probably always want to have some layer lower than this layer handle it. But yeah, basically we just have the call, return true, or sorry, return false, and then inside of here we have to make another change. Oh, and I have to specify that events is in the enterprise namespace. So before we get to returning false, we have to actually set that boolean. And we don't have access to it yet because right now it is simply a static boolean declared inside of the draw call. So let's cut it out. We're going to move it out and up to the top here. This is where we keep our other state. Now that we have this outside and in the local scope, we can now set it to false, and that should be all it takes. Cool, so let's close out of the editor, and F7 to build. Cool. And then let's open up the scene and go to the scene view, and we got the camera moving. And now when I click and hold and Alt Tab away at the same time, oh, we still got a problem, don't we? It's still not releasing. So how is that then? That's interesting. So isTrapped is false. Return false. That seems to be simple enough. So maybe there's something happening where the subscription's being purged before it can be executed. Let me try this again. I'll set a breakpoint on the code in question. Oh, whoops. Yeah. We don't care about window focus. We care about window lost focus. Easy mistake. Alright, now when we go to Alt Tab away, hopefully it'll be better. Opening up the scene, go to the scene, right click and drag, and while I'm right clicking and dragging, I alt tab away, and it's better. And it actually hit my breakpoint, but it kind of doesn't matter. Alt tab away, got my mouse back, come back, and then I can, yeah. Now interestingly, when I alt tab away and then come back, I have to right click twice in order to regain the camera controls. So maybe there's something else that I need to change that I forgot about. Mark for focus, maybe? Yeah, it's a little confusing. I'm going to set a breakpoint here. Well, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to hold down on the right mouse button, alt tab away, and then set a breakpoint on the mark for focus. So now if I go to right click, interestingly enough, it doesn't execute this code at all. It's as if it doesn't detect the right mouse button click. Huh. Continue. Maybe this is oh, okay, that's actually unrelated then. Because what's happening is when I alt tab back, the view doesn't have focus yet. Huh. That's weird. Anyway, I guess that's all though. So let's quickly unmark that bug, which I wrote down in Trello somewhere. Yep. Archive. In. Cool. And I'll quickly commit that, and then we're back to the regular scheduled programming, working on the inspector. So that would be here in the scene view. We move the isTrapped bool up, and we subscribe to editor window lost focus. Easy. At some point, I'm gonna need to probably start giving my bugs numbers, like issue numbers, to make it a little bit easier to tell them apart inside of the repo when I go to look through the commits. But I'm not quite there yet. I don't even have versions yet because it's too early days. Let me get my core temps going. It's supposed to hit 96 Fahrenheit today. Cool. And let's now take a look at the hierarchy. So hierarchy right now is literally just an empty thing. Oh, sorry, not hierarchy, inspector. Inspector is just an empty thing. It's literally just begin and end on the window. So it's kind of a blank canvas for what we need. Let's take a look at what kinds of things we want to add. So I'm gonna open up a few things. I'm gonna open up Unity again, because they're great templates to follow. And I'm waiting for both the compilation and Unity to open at the same time. Inside of IamGUI, we're going to take a peek through the widgets demos and identify which widgets we want to use. It'll probably be very simple. There we go. And running the editor, go to File, Open Scene just to have something. And then let's take a look at DRIM GUI. So inside of this view, today we're only going to worry about the transform component. It's not actually a component, it's just data that every entity has associated with it. But basically when you have one or more entities selected, you'll have the ability to view and or edit the, the transform component directly in the inspector. Let's take a look at the widgets that we've got. Let's see here. Text, no. Vertical sliders, data types. Okay, so here's something. You can click and drag on these guys to set a value to one of these data types. How about this? Drag slider flags. Okay, so this is more like what I was hoping for. So these are sliders, which represent a value, and we could use one of these for any parameter that is a range. However, with position, there's no absolute min or max or whatever. And if there was, it would be such a huge range that a slider would still basically be meaningless. So what we'll do here is we'll copy out this style and use one for each axis. I wonder if there's actually a there might be a demo of this exact same thing. Yeah, a multi-component widgets. Okay, so input float 3, input, yeah, okay, so that's nice. So this is what we're talking about. Drag float 3. Basically, we've got three side by side items you can drag, or you can type a number into. That seems to me like what I want. We'll have to play around a bit with. I don't really like the fact that I can't control the scale of my clicking and dragging. What would be really ideal is if I could click and drag on a digit and then have that digit be the scale at which we increment or decrement. Maybe there's something like that and I just haven't seen it yet. Anyway, while I'm mulling that over, we've got Unity pulled up and we've got a similar view going. So as you'll see here, whenever we select a entity, we'll see inside the inspector the name, its tags, its layer, and a bunch of other generic data that every entity has. And then we'll see this transform component, which is kind of a trick. It's transform is entered into the inspector as if it's a component, but I think that under the hood, it's actually just a part of the entity object on the C++ layer. That would be my first guess anyway. I don't see any reason why they should act as if an entity will not have a transform. They all do, and they always will. However, in addition to showing the position, rotation, and scale, and the controls to handle such, you'll notice that if I select more than one, an interesting behavior appears. They've got dashes wherever the values differ, and they'll have the values that match will be the same. This is a quick way of telling you that these can be edited in unison because they are all the same, and these can not be edited in unison. That is, changing the value here would change disparate values into the same value. Yeah, so that's probably a good way to think of it. So I'll need to have a check before when we go to draw the inspector panel. I'll need to have a check to see which values are identical between the items we have selected. And that might get a little bit iffy because of floating point rounding errors, but we'll come back to that in a minute. I would really like the ability to do something like do something like what Max MSP does. Maybe do I still have an active license on Max MSP? I'm not sure. I guess we'll find out in a minute. But there's a particular behavior in Max MSP's number boxes that I want. Okay, it looks like I've got it. So just to demonstrate, it's been a while. So this is a number box in Max MSP. So if I leave edit mode, cancel. Max MSP, if you're not familiar with it, it's a visual programming environment. So the way that Max MSP's number boxes tend to work, and I'll use a floating point box for this because it's more applicable, is that if you were to click and drag in the window, the point at which you click and drag is the scale of it sets the scale of your dragging up to a point, because at a certain point you're talking about too many digits. But like, for example, on this guy, if I get it up to 300 and I click and drag on on the left hand side, you'll see that it's only incrementing in values of 1. But on the decimals part down here, if I click and drag 4 digits in, then all of a sudden I'm incrementing by one of those units, 4 digits in. Same thing goes for that. That's a behavior I would like to see. That's not really a thing here. Does Unity have something like that? Be interested in seeing. Now Unity, it just has a text box, and then you can click and drag on. Oh, can't you? Yeah, you can click and drag on the letter of the axis to make a change. Let's see if there's something like this in my Twitch overlay, because I forgot to do that. Let's see if there's something like that hiding inside of the demos. Kind of doesn't seem like there is, but you never know. You see, even these color picker widgets, they still operate on that same left and right dragging principle. Okay, yeah, so I think for now we'll go ahead and model it after the multi-component widgets, and come back to it later. So let's head to the code. And we're done with Max MSP for now, I think. All right, so this is the contents of the window. Let's add. Well, we're going to need to add in here details that apply when a object is selected. So when you don't have anything selected at all, there's no reason to put anything in the inspector, and that's not how Unity does it either. So this is fine up until we have some selected entities. So we need to know inside of here which entities we have selected. Now, as we've covered in the stream where we set this up, the entity select status is a giant bit field, 1 bit for every entity in the entity pool, meaning that any entity that could possibly be created in the scene has a bit associated with it inside of this bit field. So what we'll do is we'll take this and move it into a header where we can reference it in both the inspector and the hierarchy. Where would be a good place to do that? Views. Views should be the code that specifies an IMQE window. I think I'm going to add a new folder for this. Or a new folder, I said, not a new file. This will be, I guess, state might be the best way to think of it. And we'll add a new file now, and this will be the scene editor state.h. Cool. We use pragma once on all of our headers. I need to add this header to the cmakeLists.txt. That's going to be... Let's put that underneath layouts. Or you know what? Maybe this should be inside of the layouts folder. I think that makes sense. So delete. So within the layouts folder, you'll also have, for every layout, you'll have a header and CPP file where the state that all the views of that layout might need will live. I think that makes sense. So we'll say scene editor state.h. And I'll need a CPP file associated with it as well, so let's just add that here. Hit save, and then let's add the file scene editor state.cpp. Cool. And this will include the scene editor state.h, of course. Awesome. Off to a good start. That's good. Let's close it. And now we need to add the state that we care about. So let's start with putting this all in a namespace. This is going to be editor scene editor. Yeah, that seems good. And then I won't even have a I won't even have a subsection. I'll just have this be inside of editor scene editor. And I think the views, if I'm remembering correctly, yeah, so the views are within editor views, just in case I wanted to put that view in another layout. I may change my mind about that arrangement later, but for now, I'll leave it like this. And now we need to have the entity select status bit fields be declared inside of here. No longer static, because we want this to be in multiple translation units. And we also don't do the initialization like this. We do this in the definition. So we'll take and copy this again, and we'll head to the scene editor state, and then we'll do the the namespace as before. That'd be editor scene editor is the namespace, and then inside of here we actually do the definition. Entity select status bit field. In order to gain access to the max entities constant, we do need to include enterprise. Come on. Oh, it doesn't really want to. IntelliSense doesn't want to give me enterprise for some reason. But yeah, I know what it is, so I'll just type it and then figure out compilation issues later. Enterprise, everything was scene manager .h is where this is declared. But apparently IntelliSense is not picking up on the fact that it should be included now. Let's go back to cmakeLists. Or the editor. Yeah, scene editor state.h and scene editor state.cpp. And yeah, it's spelled correctly, so it's just whatever. I'll rerun cmake configure. Maybe that'll help. Cannot find source file scene editor state.h. Oh, because I'm still looking inside of the layout or the scene. Yeah, this needs to be inside the layouts folder. That's why. Whoops. Okay, and then if I head back, it'll be nicer. Perfect. Awesome. Max entities is presently a compile time constant, so we can actually just directly use it when we go to do the static initialization of the bit field. And inside the header, we get rid of this, I believe. Do we get rid of that in the header? Sometimes I forget the rules. I believe that it's like you just declare the array like this, and then as long as it's defined, that the compiler will be able to link to it. Anyway, let's head back to the hierarchy. The hierarchy now doesn't have access to the bit fields because that's declared in the other header. Let's add that header here. So we got layouts, scene editor. We now will do scene editor state as well. And then entity select status bit field. We can either prefix all of them, or I think in this situation I will prefer to just say using editor, scene editor, entity select status bit field, like that. That just brings it into the namespace for this file. Okay, yeah, so it looks like size of does need the size in the header, so there we go. But it feels weird to have a double declaration like this where we tell it how big it is in both locations. Let me just quickly double check the rules on that. Right. Okay, now that makes sense. I just had forgotten. So actually inside of scene editor state.h, I had forgotten to make this external. I'm so used to working inside static classes that I'm forgetting the obvious answer. And then we don't do the assignment here. We do that in CPP. But both locations need to know how big it is. Perfect. All right, let's ensure that compiles. Oh, I gotta close the editor though. Okay, we got some problems. Unknown type uint64t. Really? Okay. So I guess I'll need to do an include on the fixed width type, which is, I always forget. See stdint. There we go. And try that again. What is it now? Use of undeclared identifier EP. EP constants max entities. Oh, I forgot to include enterprise scene manager.h, where max entities is actually defined, or declared, I should say. Didn't I just add that to one of these others? Yeah, I added it to the CPP file. That's not necessary now. I'm on the fence as to whether it's good form to allow the header to be the only place that includes the required header, but yeah, I think it'll be fine. Cool. All right, easy enough. Everything's working. So now that we have the ability to access the state of the scene editor variables inside of both the hierarchy and the scene view, or the hierarchy and the inspector, we can now start to do some intelligent stuff with it. So let me add that header. That was layouts scene editor state.h. And we would say, well, we would want to know how many entities we have created. So I suppose that would be something that we can get from the scene manager. So let's go EP scene manager entity Well, I can get all entities. That would give me the vector containing all of the IDs of all the entities. That's not super helpful. I just want the count. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to have that stored as a value inside of the state header. So we'll do extern. In this case, it'll be, I'll use size t for which is the standard type for lookup in an array. And we'll do entity, we'll say total entity count. And then inside of the CPP file, we define it. All right. And now inside of the hierarchy, we just got to locate wherever we populate the entity select status, which actually just appears to be here. We'll set total entity count to be equal to the size of entities. Like that. Yeah, and in this case, I'll do the entire thing. We're already inside of the editor namespace, so this would just be scene editor total entity count. Okay, and now inside of the inspector, we have the count. So we'll say what we can do is we can do a for loop to iterate through the bit field and identify which entities are selected. So we'll just do for int I equals 0, I is less than scene editor total entity count and I++. Simple enough. And then we'll say if scene editor entity select status bit field at I divide by 64. If that has the I mod 64th bit set, then we will consider it for drawing in the inspector. So how would we do that? It would be like, oh sorry, it would be a bitwise and, that's right. So it'd be a bitwise and of 1 pushed over by the value of I mod 64. before, like that. And if this value is non-zero, then that means that the bit is set. Cool. So what do we want to do with it? We could, let's start at the very least just by making, let's start by just tracking whether any of these are selected. So whether after we're done with this loop, we have selected a single one of these. And then from there, we will start tracking the transforms of each of them. So I'll do a bool. This will be one, at least one selected. Set it to false at first. And then we, inside of here, if it's non-zero, we'll say equals true on all of them. And then at the end of the loop, we'll say if at least one entity selected, then we will do IamGUI add some text. I think we need to just say one is selected. Hopefully that's hopefully this does what I immediately assume is to write into the window. But yeah, let's compile that. F5. And open up a scene like that. And in the hierarchy, we select, yeah, sweet. So we have the entities here. The same selection from the hierarchy is populating a variable or a set of variables that is available inside of the inspector. And the inspector is quite correct when we say that we have one selected. So now we need to do something useful with it. So I'm going to make a block. And then if there is an item selected, then we will draw things. The first of which would be the transform component section. Though maybe we want to consider the naming. There's probably other things that we'll want the editor or the inspector to display, but we're not quite there yet. So we'll just add the transform details. We'll need to have a collapsible header, probably. I think that would make a lot of sense. Let's check. In IamGUI, I'm going to take another review of collapsible headers and see what we can work with. So let's take a look at the widget section. So there's text, colorful text, word wrapping, yada yada yada. Collapsing headers. Okay. So this looks pretty good. The header with a close button. Don't need a close button. I just need a regular collapsible header. So let's locate this underneath collapsing headers. We're going to go to IamGUI demo.cpp and search for the words collapsing headers. And this is this action, IamGUI demo marker widgets collapsing headers. Okay, and it looks pretty simple. We just have a if IamGUI collapsing header section. And we can pass in tree node flags if we want. And in this case, they just have text being listed underneath. That's fine. So let's use IamGUI collapsing header in the inspector. Down here. The label is going to need to be transform. And IamGUI tree node flags. I'm not actually sure what tree node flags we have, so let's take a look at those. There's allow item overlap, bullet, collapsing header, default open, framed, leaf. Open on arrow, open on double click, selected. Yeah, I don't think we need any of those, so we'll just leave it at the default. I will say if blah 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 blah, and then inside of this block, we would actually do what we need to. Except for that's not where I wanted to put this code. I wanted to put this code down here. Yeah. And so just for the sake of demonstrating, I'll have the one is selected underneath the transform header. Oh, crap, gotta close the window. I keep forgetting to do that. All right. Cool. Open scene, this one. And then, there we go. And now we've got a header with transform in it, and we have text showing up beneath it. I kind of want that to be indented. And I think that's how it was in the demo as well, wasn't it? If we go to the collapsing headers. I guess not. Oh well, I'll put that on the back burner for now. Let's do the multi-component widgets. So we have an X, Y, and Z for or 3-component input for the position, the rotation, and the scale. All 3 of those. Even though the rotation is technically stored as quaternion, we're actually going to expose it as roll, pitch, and yaw inside of the inspector, because that's how humans think. So let's locate this. So I'm looking for the text input float 3 inside of the demo. Here. And that works by literally just saying drag float 3. That's interesting. So we pass in a pointer to a value. We pass in a speed, which apparently is like an interpolation when you go to drag the slider around. And then they have a minimum and maximum that you can provide. Okay, seems simple enough. So let's do IMGUI drag float 3. And the label on this one is going to be position. And we need an array of floats to represent the values, it seems. Yeah, and my impression, even though it's not explicitly stated, is that it actually will update these values as you modify. So for now, just for the sake of confirming that things work, I'm going to go ahead and just do a static float array like this and pass it in. And then we will, once I've confirmed that the sliders are in there and working, I will replace this with the data that we want to modify from the selected entities. And then we can take that data and tell the engine to update those positions. So I'll give this a slightly different name. We'll say pause. Excuse me. pause floats, I guess. I don't know. And then we'll do pause, we'll do rote, and we'll do scale. And these are back threes. Cool. So we'll do position with pause floats. We don't need a min or max. We want a speed of 0. Wait, is that right? Do we want a speed of 0? No, we will want a speed. Slider requires a speed of 0. The sliders don't have speed. Okay, I'm following. But we do need to have a speed. Otherwise, when will it, we need it to know how quickly we want the value to change per frame. I'm presuming that's per frame. So we'll do 2.1f on that. The min and the max we can just leave to 0. We do care about the format, but I'm going to leave it at the default for now. Which it looks like this is going to be the value up to 3 decimal points with an F following it. That's totally fine for me. So let's set it like that. And then we'll repeat for rotation and scale and pass in the appropriate variables out here. Cool. Let's see how that looks. I gotta close the program again. I keep forgetting to close it. There we go. Open scene. Okay. So that's not bad looking necessarily. I think it would look better if position, rotation, and scale were on the left side. So it would say position and then you see the value. I think this feels probably pretty good for a speed. I may have to hack IMGUI at some point to do the speed variably, like we were talking about from MaximSP's example. But for now, oh man, itchy. For now, this is probably okay. I wonder if there's a style. If I go to the demo again. This was underneath multi-component widgets. There might be like a flag I can specify to put the label on the left side. Let me look for that now. Leave the min and the max to 0. And we'll leave the format where it is. It's probably pretty good. 0.3f. And then IMGUI slider flags. Always clamp, invalid mask, logarithmic, no input. Okay, it doesn't seem like there's an option there. I'm gonna quickly search for other instances of drag-float 3 in the demo. Oh, that's interesting. That's the only one. Okay, let's look at its source code then and see whether there's an option. Ugh. Too sleepy. Okay, so this is what this looks like. The contents of drag float 3 is literally just drag scalar n. So this is a wrapper around an abstraction. Pass in the label, tell it the data type, which is float. Pass in the address of the variables and how many to change. Yeah, so we just forward everything onto drag scalar n. Push item label. Push multi-items widths. And we call this thing calc item width. Calculate the default item width given value passed to whatever, and so on. So this is apparently getting the width of the entire space we have to render things. Let's see what push multi-item widths does with it. So we give it the number of things that we want to pass in. And the full width. Okay, that's interesting. So it basically just divvies up the space, so the next however many items you have will fill that space. Now the interesting part here is that the push multi-item widths takes the number 3, and that suggests that it's only trying to make room for 3 things, but if we include the text, it should be making room for 4 things. Okay, so it does the 3 items, and then it does if find render text and label. So if we have a label, then it looks for the end of the text. However much space it takes to render that text. And then same line is the thing that actually puts the text on the same line as the group. Okay, so this is kind of hard-coded then. We do the values and then we do the labels. So I guess I would need to... Do I really have to implement my own? That seems sort of... Maybe I can pass in a null label. I want to run again and quickly see if I open up a scene. I just quickly want to see how it reacts to a very small size. Yeah, no, it seems to be evenly distributing that space for the most part. Okay, you know what? I will just move on and allow the position, rotation, scale labels to be on the right-hand side. Eventually, I'm going to have to do a pass over the editor to beautify the whole thing to make sure everything actually looks really nice. So I'm just going to save this layout thing for then and worry about getting something that looks a little bit nicer down the road. For now, let's focus on actually utilizing the inspector. There we go. Actually utilizing the inspector to handle the manipulation of this data. So let's head back to the code. I'm going to change out of this to something else. I'll just use the sessions because it's more chill. Yeah, so we'll put that question on the back burner for now. For now, we need to worry about setting these values. So for starters, these arrays need to be populated some other way. They need to be, instead of static floats living inside of this tiny little section, we need to make them non-static float arrays that we populate during the begin loop. Actually, for that matter, this could probably live inside of the inspector window section. There we go. I'll also need a way to display a non-value inside of the selectors, which actually might not be possible just using drag scalar n. That's not clear. I need a way to put in like dashes or something to tell IMGUI that this should be an illegal value or something like that. Because right now it will only do floats. Maybe there's a. Let's leave this as its own window for now. So what I'm thinking is that perhaps the solution will come down to use of the format string. It's this guy. If format is null, then we use get data type info to get the format. Otherwise, we use patch format string float to int. So first thing it does is it checks to see whether the first symbol is a %, and followed by a dot, and then a 0, and then an F, and then a 0. Fast legacy path for %.0f, which is expected to be the most common case. Okay. And that just returns a %d. Okay, so this is like this whole thing is a backwards compatibility format thing. Maybe there's a guide on this online. Let's look for it. Oh, is this literally C-style format strings? Yes, it is, isn't it? What I was thinking was that if we have a value that's like not a number, which is like this guy, then we could display a line. And then I would just use not a number when we have multiple items with differing values set up. I don't think that we can use printf style formatting strings for this, but I'm just double checking. I think it'll just display not a number if we use not a number. I'm gonna give it a shot real quick. Yeah, so when we have a not a number, it just says NaN on it. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think this over. I'm gonna take a quick break. I'll be back in like, I don't know, 10-15 minutes. Alrighty, I'm back. Yeah, got my mic on. Hey Jola, welcome back. This new GPU driver update. Turns off the GPU fans when it's not hot. Oh, that's fun. Yeah, that's something that mine did out of the box, and I thought something similar. So I'm using a GTX 970, and its driver, I think you can disable it inside of its settings, but by default it doesn't turn its fans on. It's an Asus version of the GTX 970. By default its fans are just off, and then when it starts to heat up, that's when they turn on. And I've learned to like it. It's only a problem if your computer overheats anyways. But yeah, I'm sure that was a surprise when it turned on for you. Anyway, I was thinking about this problem. It kind of seems to me like I'm going to need to construct my own version of this. I don't see any other way around it. So the idea of having a blank element in here is kind of incompatible with using the all-in-one vec3 drag thing, because you're using the same formatting string for all three elements, and there's not a way for me to conditionally do a dash with a printf string if there's no value. I have to do a format string for the number and make it the same for all three elements. So I've got a couple of ways to handle this. The first would be I could just go ahead and implement my own drag float3 right now that does everything the way I want it. The other would be I just deal with it for now and then use not a number to set the variables to be to be something else. So I could for example, as I loop through all of the entities in the scene that I've got selected, so as I loop through these and I gather up what their transform values are, anytime I find something that doesn't match, I could just set it to be not a number, and then use that as my stand-in for the dash dash. If I was really cranking to get a minimum viable product out like immediately, that's probably what I would do. But I want the ability to be able to drag and automatically set a new value for actually hang on, I might be able to do that now that I'm saying that out loud. Let me try it out. I want the ability to be able to set all of the values to be the same for entities that don't start out the same, if that makes sense. Let me try that out. So I've got some entities selected. This not a number, you can't click and drag to set a number from not a number, but you can do this and type in a number, then suddenly you're able to drag it. Yeah, for the moment, just for the sake of getting the ball rolling, I'm going to use this approach. These don't have to be static. I'm not going to make them static. I will set them to a default value of 0 though. Except for scale. Scale needs to be scale of 1. Okay. Yeah, so what I'll do then is I will have these arrays contain the values that will display and edit inside of this guy instead of at least one entity selected. And then I'll need to loop through all of the selected entities first and get all of their transforms. Yeah, this is probably an okay way to do it. The thing that I just kind of paused on was the thought that I'm going to be looping through the entire, through every single entity in the scene, technically speaking, to do this. So what I'm doing is I mean, it's a lot faster than that sounds because we're going through a bit field. There's only, for the entire entity pool, we have a very small amount of memory covering it. There's only, I think it was for 3,000 entities in the entity pool, we have 47 elements inside the bit field array. And unless I'm selecting most of that, I won't be iterating through nearly as much as that. So this is going to be the count of all the entities that we currently have selected in the scene. And I don't know, I'm thinking maybe it would be better just to have a vector or a list of entity IDs that we have currently selected instead of using a bit field. Because that way, whenever I go to iterate through all of the selected entities, I'm just iterating through those. I'll do it this hacky way first and then worry about optimization later. But this is something I'm gonna have to keep an eye on. So anyway, we have the total entity count, which means this is the number of entities that are currently in the scene, not just in the entity pool. And then we are looping through the entity select status bit field to check out what the transform status is on these. And eventually we'll use this loop to identify what components they have in common as well, and display those. But we'll start with transforms. So we'll say before we set at least one entity selected to true, we'll say if at least one entity selected actually no, I've got a better idea. I'm going to say for this loop I'm going to start at 1 instead of 0, and then I'll have a first case use for 0. We'll say if scene editor total entity count is greater than 0, then we will no, that's not going to work either. My brain goes into premature optimization mode a lot, and it's not great for this kind of work. Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll say if at least one entity selected is false, then we will just directly set the position, float, and scale to be whatever was selected here. Otherwise, we will say else, and we will only update if they differ. So basically what this means is that we'll say EP scene manager get entity position of the entity ID, so that'll be this guy, entities. I'll just copy this whole line into here. Entities at I dot, or sorry, parentheses dot, and then we can get the X, Y, and Z. X dot X will assign pause floats 0 to it, or assign it to pause float 0, and we'll do the same thing for the Y and the Z. I'll do this a little bit cleaner though. like that. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, I might be able to just do a direct copy. Let me review how this works. Because if the GLM type vec3, if its data is stored in a contiguous block, I can just probably just copy the whole, just like get the data from the value and just copy it into the array. Typed data is tightly packed in memory, and operations are executed with high precision in terms of UOPs. Okay. So that indicates to me that the data type is going to be just tightly packed. There's so many extensions to this type that all this code is just like conditional stuff. GLM, func declaration. Swizzling. This is all just operators. Okay, this is it. There we go. Union union type TXRS YGT ZBP. What this is saying is that we've got 3 values of type T in a row in memory, but they have these aliases essentially, but they're all floats. So this means that I can take and literally do this. I think I might have to do some casting, because the pos floats is an array of 3 floats. This is an object. I think I can just do float pointer and do a hard cast on that. Okay, but I guess maybe not. I'll do it the 1x1 route. Or what I can do is I'll do pos floats, or I'll do min copy. I'll copy to pos floats from pos, and I will do size of float times 3. I just pass in the address of? Okay, yeah, hopefully that does what I think it does. So we get the entity position, and we just copy that into pos floats. But after we've done that the first time, hey, what's up, ampersand? Oh yeah, you just said it as soon as I had it. How's it going? And at the very end of this loop, we set at least one entity selected to true. Yeah, we're working on the inspector right now, just coming up with a kind of hacky way for it to display the numbers that the selected entities have in common. So just to use continue to use Unity as a reference. You'll see all the values inside of this transform block. If you select more than one, though, all the values that they don't have in common have these dashes in them to indicate that they're not the same, and you see the ones that have in common have the numbers in them. So I'm going to kind of hack together this by displaying not a number for the items that are not in common. But that's just to save me the time of having to go and construct my own version of the IMGUI multi selector, which I'll have to do anyway when I go to beautify the app. But I've only been doing this for an hour and a half, and my throat's already raw. Anyway, so in this case, we have just encountered the first entity in the selection range, and we just directly set the values inside of the block that we're going to display in the transform section. We just directly set those values to be equal to whatever that entity's transform components have. We actually have to do this 2 more times now that I'm thinking about it. Let me do that now, because we have to do this again for the scale and rotation. And then this one we're going to be using a GLM quat, and we'll say rot, and then on this one we'll say scale, like that. And then for the quaternion specifically, we actually can't just use memcopy, because we have to do we have to transform the rotation to Euler. GLM, I think it's Euler angles. And then we pass in a quaternion, and it gives us a vec3 back. Yes, what we could do is we could say, make this a vec3, and we'll just wrap this call with Euler angles. Yeah, because it'll take the quaternion and it'll return the roll, pitch, and yaw. And I can actually do memcopy on that. Okay, hopefully that's working the way I think it will. And then down here in the else block, we basically just need to do a comparison to see whether the value inside of the other selected entity is the same as a different one. If I'll say if entities at I this is going to be a little bit ugly. We're going to need to go through each element of the position, rotation, and scale. So let's copy these. Oops. Down into here. There we go. And then we'll have to loop through and compare each. So if, say, if pos.x is not equal to pos floats 0, then we'll say pos floats 0 equals not a number. And we do the same thing for the others. Again, this is super hacky, but our focus today is on getting something working, not making it pretty. And then we have to do the same thing for rotation floats. And scale floats. Okay, good. And I'll quickly use clean format to make that pretty. Yeah, there we go. So the end result of all of this is that by the time we get to this block, pos floats, rote floats, and scale floats should equal the values of only the values that the selected items have in common, and the rest should say not a number. Yeah, and then we should, at this point, go through and set the values back to the selected entities, because by the time this code returns, the user may have changed the position, rotation, or scale through the sliders, and those will be stored back in pos floats, rote floats, and scale floats. And we'll need to assign that to every selected entity. Then this is going to be really hacky, but so actually what we would be doing is we'd be saying enterprise scene manager set entity. Oh, that's interesting. Do I not have a... I've got a getter for positions, but I don't have a way for you to just directly set the entity position. So we're going to need to add that. Let's do that now. So we have get entity name, get entity position, rotation, and scale. We need to have a setter corresponding to these. So let's do that. And when we go to set, we can just do void on the return. I'm going to need to have two versions of set entity rotation. One that's going to be the GLM quad type, and then one that's going to be GLM vec3, because it's going to be a pretty common practice to use Euler angles to set that up. So setting entities rotation, yeah, entities new orientation. All right, and then GLM vec3 scale. Cool. And now we've got to implement these. So we'll go to scene manager.cpp, and underneath the get entity scale, we'll add the setters. This is all kind of boilerplate. Not quite boilerplate, but almost boilerplate, so I don't really see the need to narrate. Alright, so that's name, that's position. Is that, I had to say the full thing, position? Yeah. Scene manager set entity position. The only thing different about the set entity rotation, accepting the rotation as a vector 3, is that these are coming in as Euler angles. We had to actually convert them into a quaternion, which we do using the constructor of quat. And I wonder, can I simply just do this? Maybe this would work. No. I was thinking maybe I could just initiate the constructor as a member of this, but yeah, I guess not, so we'll assign it. I'm sure that that'll be optimized so that there's not a copy. Okay, the last one is scale. Okay. Ooh. Now we've got setters. So let's go back to the inspector code. And so what we're doing here now is we're saying EP scene manager set entity position. And we'll be setting the entity at entities I to the position expressed by pos floats. So this will be pos floats. Can I just cast it? I'm not sure that I can. I'll have to actually do a constructor here. Okay. Hey Jola, welcome back. You haven't missed much, not quite yet. So it doesn't look like I have the ability to just pass in like a pointer to the data as a constructor for the GLM vec3 type. So I'm just gonna have to do pos floats 0, pos floats 1, pos floats like that. Oh, oops. Entities. I forgot, I'm missing an I in there. Cool. Yeah. Oh, but there's a hitch with this plan anyway. Anytime that one of these digits is not a number, we have to set it to only the original ID. So yeah, this is going to take even more work. I'm not very happy with this situation at all. I foresee a refactor happening in the near future where I get rid of the static class system paradigm. Diarrhea sucks. Yeah. Yes, it does. That's I'll second that statement. I think you're on solid ground when you say diarrhea is awful. But yeah, this whole thing where I'm having to use getters and setters all the time, even though I'm in protected code. Wait, no, it flows. Yeah. Yeah. Even though I'm technically like in a protected section, I'm in the editor code, which is never exposed to the game developer. I'm having to use the same getters and setters that we use for game code, and that's limiting. I actually have it as a top item in my Trello board. If I go to find it in my code hygiene section, I want to switch away from my old paradigm for classes, where I was kind of using classes like namespaces for the sake of having private members be shared among systems. But I think that now that I'm working in CMake, there's easier ways to do that. And it would kind of make code like this a lot easier to write. But yeah, I'll have to come back to it. Anyway, so what I need to deal with here is I need to actually set the position to be either the original position variables or the ones that we got from IMGUI, depending on whether IMGUI is returned not a number. Trello is a organization chart board system. It's great for keeping track of projects with lots of to-do items. So in this case, I've got categories of work that needs to happen. So I have one for like each system, for example, and I have a list of all the things that I know I need to do. So for example, taking like the core tech board, there's a card at the top that says revise hash name interning scheme, because since I've moved to CMake, I've changed the way that hash names need to intern, and I haven't actually fully implemented it yet. But yeah, it's like whenever there's something that I know that needs doing, I'll write it down here so that way I don't forget. I can just come back and check out the to-do list. But yeah, eliminate static class paradigm. This is a top item now, because it's actively making my life hard when programming editor and launcher stuff. But yeah, so set entity position. First thing we do is we actually get the position from the entity as it is, and then we do a comparison on the set entity position. So we'll say if pos floats is not equal to, let's say, or if it's equal to not a number, is there a, there's got to be a macro for that. I don't deal with non-values in floats very often, so I'm just double checking to see whether this is a portable macro. The static thingy feels more like C than C++. C++ is more objecty. Yeah, and this is, believe it or not, this is a fairly common trap for noobs. And even intermediate folks. Back when I started Enterprise, I was a lot less fluent with C++ than I am now. I've learned a lot just working on this project. Float macro constant. Okay, so apparently this is a C++. I'll look it up on CPP reference just to be sure. But yeah, this topic is one that I've kind of just been delaying fixing for a while. If I go to a class in question, like if I go to Scene Manager, where we just were, and we take a look at the header, the way that I've been using it is that I've been making a class that's full of the things that are related to Scene Manager, the API. So literally the API calls, you go Scene Manager : as if it's a namespace, and then you call these things. And the only reason why I wanted that was because I wanted there to be private members and functions that were only visible to the engine layer. So that is, a game developer could call Scene Manager register fixed update function, but they couldn't call Scene Manager init or Scene Manager fixed update. That's something that only the runtime should have access to. But it's, as time passed by, like as I worked on this, the situation became more and more untenable. Because like this is the graphics API, because like the graphics API is responsible for so many things that I've got a nearly 1,000-line header file that's only got declarations. It's only got prototypes in it basically, and I have to have them all in the same file because you can't do a partial class declaration in C or C++. So yeah, it's really messy. Like this is the worst example out of all of them. And I've just kind of been putting it off for now. The idea that I wanted all of this stuff to be hidden from the developer. And in order to make this work, I have to treat the entire class as if it's a namespace, and that's just not a best practice in C++. It's, I mean, like people do it. Like on big projects, people do this exact thing. But I think I finally reached the point where I'm like, I've got to do better than this. So I'm going to have to go in and refactor and change all of these classes to namespaces, and then use internal only headers that are just not going to be visible to the game layer, but are visible to the editor and the launcher layers, to be able to share state between CPP files related to the graphic system and things like that. And if I had that working now, then this code would actually be far easier because I wouldn't have to use get or set on the entity position in the editor layer. But yeah, that refactor is going to take a bit of time, so I'm just not worrying about it for right now. But anyway, so we get the position of the entity as it is now, and then if the position that we got back from IamGUI is not a number, then we will just use the current position, pos.x. And if it's not a number, so if it is a number, then we will set it equal to posfloats 0 instead. And we'll do a similar thing for posfloats 1 and 2. This may look a little bit messy, but it does the job. Okay, sweet. So that's the idea. We get the entity position as it is. If we get not a number from IamGUI, that means that we're not modifying it. If it is a number, then we will modify it to whatever the new number is. And then we can do something similar for the other aspects of the transform. So we'll say get entity rotation, like that. And this will be a quat. And then we can say set entity position if something has changed. This is actually not going to be as straightforward, so I'll need to make this a vec3 again, and I'll need to wrap this with GLM Euler angles. Like that. And then I can use the X, Y, and Z. Like that. And of course, set entity rotation does accept Euler angles. So this should work just fine. Good, and then scale. I think it's a common practice to put private things into implementation or detail namespace, even if users have access to them. Yeah, and that's, I'm actually able to do one better than that. Originally, when I was working on this, I was using Premake and explicitly just making Visual Studio or Xcode workspaces. Now that I'm using CMake, I am able to more easily directly control the list of headers that are available to the game layer. So I can actually make like a pool of headers that are explicitly only visible to the other projects, the launcher, the editor, and the engine libraries. And the reason why I have to worry about that is because there's going to be multiple. You probably already understand this, but there's going to be multiple CPP files referring to the same state in the engine layer at the very least. So I couldn't just like make these only available inside of the CPP files. I have to make them available in a header. But yeah, before it was harder to do because I don't think off the top of my head that Premake really supports. I think you're supposed to always specify like the filter that tells Premake which header files and CPP files to use. You can't actually like type out a list of files to include or not, which is a little weird if you think about it. But CMake, that's the preferred way that you do it. They have file globbing, but that's bad practice, CMake, if you use file globbing. Yeah, it's more useful to header-only libraries, yeah. But that's still going to be a sizable refactor, so I'm just not doing it right now. But it's coming up on some of my next things I need to do. It's very soon going to be a big deal. I love CMake targets. Yeah, it took me a while to get used to CMake, but I really dig it. CMake is it's really flexible. I just wish that it wasn't like, its own scripting language. There's some complexity with CMake that I don't like, but once you understand the basics, it's great for setting up portable build systems, and I dig it. Yeah, I'll be using CMake probably for every C++ project going forward, except for really basic ones. Okay, so same difference here. We got get entity scale, then we say set entity scale, and then we need to specify scale floats, scale.x, y, and z, and scale floats 0, 1, and 2. Okay. Okay, so I think that works. Assuming that assuming that the memory alignment in the JLM vec3 type is what I think it was when I was reading through the code, then we should be fine. Yeah, that refactor is probably going to be such boring code to write that I'll probably do that completely offline. I'll probably do it as its own branch and go back to and from it in between streams. There we go. F5. Open scene. Here's the scene. Okay, we've got some entities and transforms selected. So for starters, let's back up a little bit. Let's oh, what just happened? We're missing some sprites all of a sudden. All right, so something weird's happening when I go to deselect. When I change my selection on these sprites. Let's take a look at sprite 1. Sprite 2, sprite 3. When I select sprite 1, the inspector's not even showing the transform component. That's interesting. So there's something goofy is going wrong. Let's close the scene. And let's reopen it. Okay. So for starters, everything's in the right place. We select sprite 1. We don't see the inspector. And when we deselect it, nothing happens. Okay. I select sprite 2. And then sprite 2 goes away. It disappears. Its position is... What happens if I change? Okay. What is happening? So I screwed up somewhere, but that's fun. When I go to change his position... Okay, so his position, rotation, and scale, they are all changing at the same time. So that tells me that I am using pause flutes everywhere where I should be using pause floats, rote floats, and scale floats. Pause floats. I could probably do these with not a number macro. I'm actually not immediately seeing what's wrong here. Oh, I started to do this loop with a extra clause outside where I was going to start with I, so this explains the issue with selecting the first item. Maybe that's enough to explain the rest, but I don't think it is. Okay, open scene. Okay, so let's get the camera out so we can see this a little bit better. So for starters, okay, I'm still not seeing sprite 1 appear in the inspector when I select it. We are also seeing some things screw up with the transform. Yeah, I'm having trouble spotting what's going wrong here. I'm gonna temporarily get rid of these mem copies because they are something that I already know might be causing problems. So I'll switch from using mem copy to just directly assigning each. So this will be pause values, wrote values, and scale. Floats. All right. So selecting sprite 1 is not pulling up anything in the inspector, which I kind of thought it would. So let me set a breakpoint on here and step inside. I, in this situation, is equal to... Oh, hang on. There are 2 for loops, and I forgot to set the initial value back on the first one. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, so now when I go to select the entities, well, until I go to multi-select at least, the entities don't fly around all over the place. Let's take a look at their transforms. So this is sprite 1, this guy here, if I'm not mistaken. Position is at 5x00. That seems wrong. Oh, it's this one. Okay, but cool. This is still a big step. We've got the ability to change the transform of the sprite or the sprite entity from the inspector, which is real cool. Depth testing is off, which is why this sprite is behind all of the other sprites when I bring it closer, but it is in fact closer in space than those other sprites. Maybe for simplicity, I will go back into the renderer and actually turn on depth testing. Yeah, but it looks like what's happening is that I'm getting not a number assigned to these when I wasn't expecting it. So like if I go to manually set the coordinates back to 0, it seems to work correctly. Yeah, and I can change the scale and stuff as well. So change the X scale, the Y scale. The Z scale does literally nothing when your model is completely flat. And we can, well, we can kind of, yeah, we can rotate. It's just that the scale, I think what's happening here is that the quaternions are, or the Euler angles are in radians, and I should probably change these to degrees to make it easier to follow what's happening. But yeah, there's something going wrong with the assignment back from not a number. So that would be this logic here. So the idea was that in situations where we have more than one entity selected, we will set pos floats 0 to not a number, or pos floats whatever, like whatever the IMGUI bar displays, we set that back to not a number if there is a difference between two or more of the entity's values at this point. And then back here, we will only assign the float back if it's... Oh, I see. Hang on a second. I got this backwards. So if it's not a number, I am assigning back... No, I'm assigning back pos.x, which is the original value. There must be something going wrong with this code, though. I'm going to set a breakpoint and try this again. File, open scene, like that. And then select one. Continue. So it's triggering this code each time. I'm going to turn off the breakpoint for now, and then select more than one, and I will set the breakpoint again. I think you should check out comparison between not a number and wiki page. That's probably smart. Probably overlooking something with not a number. Yeah, so it just... I'll have to use step in, right? So... Okay. Okay, so we've got not a number on X, we've got 0 and 0 on Y and Z. So not a number is finding its way into this. Okay, so that means that this ternary operation is definitely wrong. I don't actually know what quiet not a number means. Do you happen to know off the top of your head what's up? There's a range of values for not a number, and there are weird rules around it. Not remember much. Okay, so it's not a singular value then. Okay, if it's not a single value, then the equality check that I'm running is not going to be valid. It won't make much sense. Well, I don't know if that's true, because the value that these should be assigned to, I am directly assigning to the same not a number macro, right? Because like this evaluates to float IE plus 300 times IE plus 300 times 0. Right, because like this evaluates to the same thing that this does by definition. The only reason why it wouldn't is if it was being cast into a different type. Or something like that. But no, this should be casting into a float. So you got these values, you cast that into a float. You multiply by 0. I'm not really clear as to how that's supposed to work. You multiply it by 0, and then you take that whole thing and you cast it back to a floating point type. Yeah. But it seems clear that I can't be using not a number for this. Which kind of sucks. Okay. Comparison orders are specified by the IEE 754 blah blah blah, comparing two real numbers. The first number may be either less than, equal to, greater than the second number. But when at least one operand of a comparison is not a number, the trichotomy, that's quite a word, the trichotomy does not apply, and the fourth relation is needed, unordered. In particular, to not a number values, compare as ordered, unordered, not as equal. Okay. So then from these rules, not a number greater than equal to, false, 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 true. So I have to say not a number is not equal to x, and that would be the check. So I could technically do this then, and just flip the order of the ternary operands, if I'm following this correctly. Oops. And that's supposed to work better. So x equals, okay, so x equals x, or x doesn't equal x. Because if x is not a number, then these will evaluate into true or false, respectively. Okay, and all this is just because I wanted to have a floating point value represent a bad value instead of like putting my own wrapper code in there. Okay, so what we would do then is we would say, if we wanted to check, okay, if we wanted to check that it's not a number, then we would just say pos floats whatever equals to itself, like that. That's my read. Because this would come out as unordered if it's not a number. Oh, actually, it would be this. It would be not equal. Okay, we'll see. We'll see if I interpreted that correctly. That's my breakpoint. All right, continue. Take a look at the transform. Okay, so that seems to be behaving better. So if I go and cycle between each of these, their values update correctly. If I select multiples, the values that they have in common look correct, but their positions and rotations are similar. All right, I think that's working, because now I've got a multi-select going for these entities. They all have the same z value. They don't have the same x or y value, so it says not a number. And if I was to set a similar x value, then it sets it for all of them. Cool. Okay, I think we're making some progress. I don't have the ability to undo changes yet, so that's annoying. But yeah, I think that's we're off to the races. So I just went and reloaded the scene. Right, so that's a very basic thing. Let's go ahead and get the rotations set to be using degrees. Oh, that's interesting. There's also another property that's going wrong here. So when I go to try and rotate past a certain point, this is on the yaw rotation. When I get to be about half pi, the rotation is being translated into quaternions and then back to Euler angles. And so the Euler angle is not allowed to exceed half a pi on either direction, because beyond that it'll translate into the same quaternion as the plus pi, or plus or minus pi. So that might be something that we'll have to change sooner than later, because I actually do want the ability to do like this. If we have a rotation and we go to change the y on it, it should be possible to plug in any arbitrary number, as opposed to constantly flipping back to the fixed range of a full circle or a half circle. So let's take a look at that now. I really appreciate your help. What's up, by the way? You got me pointed right down the right track to get that whole nutty number thing sorted out. And this is all just a hack anyway, technically speaking. My full solution, once I've got once I've created my own version of DragFloat 3, is going to be involving like setting, like tracking with like a Boolean whether the value needs to be overwritten, and then putting in something like dashes to indicate that the value is not shared between these selected entities, instead of saying not a number, which is, not true. I wonder if I can just before I move on, I wonder if I can just switch back to using the memcopy now. Nope, there seems to be something wrong with the using memcopy, so I'll just go back to the way it was. Okay. Now when we're dealing with the rotation, rot.x. This is actually something that I should probably change in the scene manager code. So when we go to set entity rotation, instead of simply setting it to GLM quad rot, I actually need to do GLM radians for rot. Hey, is that? Can I do that? Can I just do radians and pass in a... Converts degrees to radians. Yeah, there's a version of this that accepts a vec3 and returns a vec3. Okay, yeah, that should actually, I think that should work. That's kind of cool. I can just do degrees to radians directly from directly from the vector, and I don't have to like disassemble it to do the conversion and then reassemble it. Okay, and let's see how the rotation works. Okay, so now rotation is broken for some reason. Some weird things are happening with rotation. Let's just do one sprite at a time. So that would be, we're working on this sprite down here right now. Whenever I go to change the rotation, it kind of immediately steps back. I can't think of a good reason why it would be doing that. The others are working though fine, right? Yeah, Z is working on the position. So I think I want to set a breakpoint here on a condition that makes sense for catching what's going wrong with my rotation, why it's being set back to 0. I guess I'll enter set entity rotation where this occurs, and then I will set a breakpoint and make its condition that rot.x will be equal to 0. So I think this one was sprite 1. Okay, except for this is going to trigger every frame. So say rot.x equal or is not equal to 0. And see what that gets me. Oh, that's interesting. It's like every frame. Is that because I already screwed with it, and now it's got an infinitesimally small difference? Floating point comparisons are weird, man. Okay, here we go. Sprite 1. Okay, that's extra confusing. What's the rot value I'm passing in? 0, -0, 0. So for some reason, the rotation values that I'm receiving, when I haven't set them to be non-zero anywhere, they're coming back as not equal to 0. That's for sure not what I was expecting. What's also very strange is that it seems to be interpolating back as well. So it's like the conversion to and from the Euler is introducing errors that round back to zero over time. Like every conversion that we do, which is once every frame, the difference between the conversion and zero gets smaller every frame. So it's like we have to limit the conversions to frames where we've actually changed the value. Yeah, so like when I go to set the value directly, like 90 degrees is now actually 90 degrees. It seems to be fine until I let go, and then it goes to roll back. Yeah, so I think that the conversion to and from degrees and radians is causing this problem, which is annoying. Yeah, because when I don't do the conversion, it kind of remains fixed. So the roll, pitch, and yaw seem to be fine. Technically, this is a rotation about the X, Y, and Z axes, so this is actually pitch, then yaw, then roll, I think. That's what it was. I for sure don't want to be working in radians. Yeah, yaw, then roll. I don't want to be working in radians inside of the editor. That's interesting. I don't remember setting any of these to be upside down. And it looks like there's cases where the value will be assigned not a number. Presumably not from any of my logic, but from a division or something that's happening. I don't know. Something that would surely fix this problem is if I simply stored the rotation as a degree number in Euler angles, and then simply change those directly, and then every frame convert those to quaternions, and then use those in the math. But I don't know. I don't like that very much either. Still though, this is progress. I'm still pretty happy with the fact that we've got an inspector that will do multi-select transformations, even if it's not working all that well for rotations quite yet. I think I'm probably going to call it a stream at this point already. I'm just going to do one more thing before I move on to something else, and that's I'm going to just go to the renderer and turn on depth testing. Just because now that we're working with moving sprites around in 3D space, it'll be helpful to have the foreground cover up the background. So inside of scene draw, where we got to draw sprite components, before then I'm just going to say graphics, set depth test to true. And now when I select an entity and bring it to the foreground, it should be covering up the sprites in the background. Oh, what? It's not, though. It's still not. I wonder why. Maybe there's another spot in the code where I use depth testing. That's interesting. The test state has a call to set depth test to false, but I don't think that that's executing until we're in plain editor at least. So that's a little confusing. Depth testing is only turned on and off in my code here. So maybe IamGUI is doing some depth testing toggles as well. Maybe the pipeline changes before and after each batch is affecting this. So I'll set depth test to true inside of begin batch. See how that goes. I really shouldn't be having more than one batch with this few of sprites. Alright, well, it seems like this is a good time to bust out our friend render doc and identify what's going on with the pipeline in this case, because at this point depth testing should be on, and the sprite should clearly be in front of the others, but it's not happening that way. Yeah, so let's take a look. I'll need to go to the window code and turn on double buffering, because otherwise render doc doesn't work. Recompile that, and then let's open up render doc. We'll head to the enterprise build folder. And then the working directory needs to be the enterprise root directory. The command line arguments need to be sandbox and project, where the project is test game / test game.epproj, like that. Good, and then launch. Okay. And we'll go to File, Open Scene. Here's the scene. We'll select one of these sprites, change its transform, and then bring it to the foreground. And I'll do a capture, F12. And let's take a look at the pipeline at this point. Oh, I know what the problem is. At least I think I do. Okay, so in the scene view, we have a frame buffer that we rendered to display the contents of the scene. Yeah, and I've only got the render buffer attachment for the color. I don't have a depth buffer. So let's add that now. Okay. So in this case, change the image format to depth 24 stencil 8. That's a pretty common one. And then we'll just use nearest on the texture filter. And then instead of doing makes texture true, we'll say make texture false. That means that internally this will be attached as a GL render buffer, which is a little bit faster because it doesn't have all the infrastructure set up that a texture requires. So I can't bind it as a texture, but it's allowed to be used in depth testing. And then in here, we specify depth attachment as an additional attachment to the frame buffer. Okay, cool. I think that was it. Let's try and rerun. For that matter, I may need to check out the game buffer as well. What's this? Format. But that's the image format there. I should be returning GL depth stencil, but instead I'm getting a assert no entry. Glad I could help with the small things. Pretty useless when it comes to graphics. Yeah, it's you know, different skill sets, I suppose. I think I would argue that your skill set of catching the small problems is more important, because you know, it's like if you mess up the small things, then you won't even be able to get to do the triangles, right? Yeah, I'm not clear on what's happening here. Call stack, main thread. Okay, so we're in the middle of calling GL render buffer storage. We're calling my helper function get GL internal format, passing in a format, which why is a format negative 69 something or other thousand? Because that should be with the depth attachment. Depth 24 stencil 8 is a value of 7. Oh, whoops. Yeah, that's I was still setting the values for texture attachment instead of depth attachment. Whoopsie. All right, this should be better. What's happening now? In GL invalid operation on GL render buffer storage. That's interesting. The width and the height and the internal format seem to be fine. Maybe there's a problem with okay, so target must be JL render buffer, yeah. Specifies the name of the render buffer object for GL named render buffer storage. Oh, that's this one. I'm using just regular GL render buffer storage. So the second is the internal format, specifies the internal format to use. Then the width and height in pixels, which width and height are correct. GL invalid operation is generated if render buffer is not the name of an existing render buffer object. Okay. So invalid operation was the error that I got back. So apparently the render buffer name is not right. Okay. So we start out with attachment being 0. We get the attachment from, or the attachment name from depth attachments dot second. But for some reason this is still set to 0. So there must be an issue with my create code and my create frame buffer code. I'm not actually creating a render buffer. Hang on. Oh no, this is not where I do that. This first check is just confirming that I'm not trying to attach more than one depth attachment to my frame buffer object. If a.make texture is true, then we do this, glgen textures and bind texture and yada yada yada, and that's tried and true code. If it's false though, then we have a RBO. We use gen render buffers, one passing in the address of RBO. Then we go gl bind render buffer storage, and then we attach it. Okay, and then we never store the handle. Right, so I actually need to set depth attachments FBO handle to be false, and then the RBO handle. All right. I guess I've just never needed to use this API before. So it would be, I can probably just copy the code from up above. Here. So depth attachments for the FBO handle will set to false and the value to RBO. Yeah, and then for the color formats, I need to do something slightly different. So I'll put this for those, and then for the color attachments, we'll say color attachments dot in place back with these parameters for the constructor. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So that should hopefully fix the issue. F5. File open scene. There's the scene. And now I should have a depth attachment. Yeah, now we've already got Z fighting, so that tells me that we're on the right track. And if I bring the position in foreground, perfect. All right, so there was a bug in my frame buffer API, which once fixed, I was able to use to attach a depth attachment. So now we've got foreground and background stuff working correctly in the scene view. And we've also got the starts of a transform inspector, which has some problems still, particularly with the rotation, which doesn't seem to want to play nice with degrees. I'll have to think about that problem and come back to it, but yeah, right now, even though I've only been going for like 3 hours, I feel kind of spent. So I think I'm just going to take a break from this and do something else that needs doing. But yeah, this is cool. This is still I should be celebrating every time I accomplish one of these tasks, because it's like, this is cool. This is farther than I've gotten before. We're almost to the point where we can start making things inside of the editor, and when we get to that point, then we're starting to do things that look more like games and less like, you know, tech demos. But anyway, thanks for joining me. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Talk to you later.